By the end of this book, I want you to make a choice. Will you accept the machine control of human beings or resist it? And if the answer is resist, on what basis will you defend the rights of humans against the logic of machines? Now, I would do a quick introduction to Paul as well, so you get an idea of where he's coming from on this perspective. That Paul is an award-winning writer, broadcaster, and filmmaker. He was previously the economics editor of Channel 4 News. His books include Post-Capitalism, Why It's Kicking Off Everywhere, The New Global Revolutions, Live Working, Die Fighting, and Rare Earth, a novel. So prolific, focused on what has happened and what's going to happen in relation to our economic situation. I'd like to start, since again we're in the ethics tent, let's think about ethics in relation to this.
Exiled in the ethics.
Exiled.
Any further away from the main action would be in the canal.
But you talk about the rights of humans against the logic of machines. How does that tie into ethical questions?
Okay, I will now unleash myself like Superman. So, I mean, I think we are in a sort of triple crisis. And it was really interesting to hear Anna's beforehand. I'm probably going to turn out more anti-capitalist than me, the actual anti-capitalist. Because as you know, we Marxists, we love to write 50-page documents about how brilliant capitalism's been so far. But why it's not going to be so anymore. So the three crises that we're in are one of an economic system that doesn't work, as a result of 10 years of crisis, stagnation, crisis, confusion over the role of economics, we've now got evaporating consent for democracy and for the rule of law and human rights, and alongside that, a crisis of algorithmic control, whereby company A can use company B, which has 5,000 data points on every American, to manipulate and control the outcome of an election. That's now. That's before you get any kind of artificial intelligence. That's just basic sort of server farm, big data, and a lot of electricity. So as I reported this, I came to the conclusion that we were seeing something deeper. We were seeing a crisis of what I call in the book the crisis of the neoliberal self, a crisis of the self created in the market era that had ceded control to an autonomous system. And in economics, that autonomous system is called the market. You may not know that Friedrich Hayek, the guru of right-wing free market thought, actually conceived the market as what he called a spontaneously emergent order. That is, an autonomous system that could outthink human beings. And the thesis of the book is, having handed control willingly of our lives, ourselves, our cognition in many respects, to this autonomous system, that turns out to be a brilliant entry-level drug for, in the mid-20th century, handing control of our lives to a real autonomous intelligent system, which is a machine. And from there, I've kind of concluded that what we need to start thinking about, and the premise of the book is that whether it's the corporations and startups in this conference, or whether it's states, or whether it's simply human beings in civil society, we all need to become much more intelligent clients for moral philosophical thinking, because it's that underlies the ethics that we will try to embody in the autonomous systems that we build in future.
So in the book, you work your way through some of the classical ethical systems and approaches. Where do you end up after having scanned quite neatly a history of ethics of at least a couple of thousand years?
Well, yeah, and I know you're a specialist in this, so I'm glad you said the word neatly. Look, right, I think that the possibility of artificial intelligence, the possibility of unaided learning by machines brings humanity up close to ethical and moral philosophical debates that we've kind of assumed were nice to have. That they're really interesting. Some people spend their entire lives. Your movie that you made for your Cambridge project had a Buddhist and it had a Catholic priest in it and all the rest of it. But to me, it goes like this. And in this, I'm influenced by a philosopher called Alasdair MacIntyre, who started out as a Marxist and ended up as an Aristotelian. It goes like this. The two ethical systems that we are the most aware of in modern capitalism are utilitarianism, which make as many people as possible happy by doing the least harm, and lists drawn up from apparent eternal human attributes, associated primarily with the philosophy of Immanuel Kant, but in general, you could say a good example would be the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. The technical term for this is deontological ethical systems. They come from being, the being of human beings. Now, McIntyre argues, and I argue as well on this basis, he argues, look, neither of these stands the test of a discussion of what is the human being, on what are they based. They're effectively the products of capitalism. I would go further and say they're both ideologies. They match very closely the ideologies of a market society with the state standing above it, claiming to protect the rights of humans or to protect certain principles that humans embody. In reality, says McIntyre, there are only two really coherent philosophical systems faced with the depth of the challenge that we face as modern people. One is Friedrich Nietzsche, which can be summed up in the two words, fuck you. That is, Nietzsche says there are no morals. Morals are a joke. Morals are an invention. There is no God. All forms of secular morality, like ethical systems, are simply your attempt to substitute for God, since there isn't one. And if I want to shoot you in the face and run away laughing, that's as if a student prank had been taking place, says Nietzsche. That's up to me, if I can do it. The other one is the one that says, what is the good society? And what kind of person do we need to create, or does one need to create as oneself to live in this good society? That's Aristotle, that's communitarianism, that's virtue ethics. I think what the contribution I'm trying to make in this book is that the possibility of AI brings us quite face to face with that dichotomy. Why? Let's go through them. You can, of course, program AI with a bunch of deontological ethics. You can say, okay, there's the Geneva Convention, there's my autonomous killing vehicle, the vehicle must obey the Geneva Conventions. That's good. There's nothing wrong with that. Or we could say that the AI is meant to be running a small country, or a smart city. It must behave in a utilitarian way, and it can do the trolley problem, and it can work out what to do. However, if you're going to push an autonomous system that either looks like a human being or thinks as quickly and as well as a human being, it doesn't have to have consciousness, it can just be an artificial general intelligence, build it and push it out into the street. It needs a theory of human beings. It doesn't necessarily need consciousness, although consciousness will create extra problems. But if it has a theory of human beings, my argument is it can't find one in utilitarianism nor in eternal lists, because its experience is always going to create the bad case, bad law problem out of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. It's going to go, hold on a minute, people don't like this Universal Declaration. Lots of human beings don't like this Universal Declaration. Fascists don't like it. People from the Global South don't like it. They think it's imperialist. Maybe I don't like this. My experience conflicts with it. So the plea in the book is for us to begin as we program and as we design autonomous systems. First of all, we'll come to the practicalities of how you do this, but in a bit. But first of all, to try, for those involved in decision-making around these systems, to have at the heart of their debate, what do we think about moral systems? And morals frighten people. Because ethical committees, that you can have one of you developing a new drug, it's easy. Ethics committee, how many people get this placebo? Do we pull it if it's really good or really bad? What's the aftercare? What laws do we have to obey? That's a closed task. But for an open task, like designing an artificial general intelligence with autonomy, you just need, you need to be building in at the very beginning the issue of what is our theory of human beings and what morality are we following. I mean, you could simply say, even questions like, is it ethical to publish research? That I know are big issues now in the AI sphere. I work for a big AI, Acme big AI company, let's call it, big Acme AI company based in London, near King's Cross. And at the same time, I have like a postdoctoral research project in AI, and I love going to a bunch of academic conferences because I may want a future career in academia or with a non-Acme company. So there's my research. Is it ethical to publish this research? Well, obviously it's ethical because the company says it is, and your university never said there was anything wrong with it, but a theory of human beings makes you ask those questions. And it makes you then conceive the task of the AI as being a society-wide task.
So on the subject of the human, you describe in some places in the book that you feel that we're being sold different versions of the human for the ends of different ideologies and controlling groups. But on the other hand, in some places, you're very skeptical about subjective interpretations of what the human being is and for. You're quite anti-postmodernism, I have to say. We won't go too far into postmodernism now, but is that a tension that you recognise, that you feel that we can get to a more normative description of the human, or are we entirely sold by these narratives of what the human being is?
For me, as a Marxist, we are essentialist. What we describe a human being, human nature, that all other frightening phrase, has certain attributes which form the essence of the human being. For us, it is humans have a species being. It's not, you cannot study the individual on their own. Now, the Marxist theory of human nature is this. We evolved quite accidentally. There's no designer. No one pressed the start button. But the species evolved, or the handful of species which became human beings, we're the ones that survived, with consciousness, imagination, design capabilities, in other words. We are technologists and cooperators by nature. Now, if you accept this, it is possible to extrapolate from that proposal, which I think is biologically upheld by most of what we know about evolutionary biology and anthropology. Some of the crucial steps, Michael Tomasello, an anthropologist who studies the higher primates, thinks we went through. First of all, we developed language and consciousness, and then as an evolutionary step, we developed cooperation, which is the observable difference between humans and, say, orangutans. We cooperate consciously. Now, if you think that's who we are, you can extrapolate from that logically the teleology part of all Aristotelian philosophy. That is, human beings have a purpose, and their purpose is to liberate themselves from what it was like to be a human being in the previous generation. So whilst we say human beings have an essence, that essence is constantly changing. We have a social history. And it is logical to assume that since we've gone from 200,000 years ago stone tools to 12,000 years ago agriculture, pottery, cities 5,000 years ago, 200 years ago we get the steam engine, and last year I saw a silicon chip with 1 trillion switches on it, 4 nanometers thick. It's possible to assume that we're going to liberate ourselves, that we have a positive, a clear, indeed, bright future. So that's the kind of theory of humans that I hold to, and from it, I can deduce certain things that I want AI to do and not do. As regards, now let's go not bother about postmodernism. Let's just say that there is a huge anti-humanistic streak in modern thought, and part of it originates out of Marxism. The structuralist Marxism of the 1960s and 70s says history's a process without a subject. Another word for a process without a controller, in other words, is a machine. We created postmodernism. Michel Foucault says humanity is a social construct. We just created it as a concept. It doesn't really exist. It can be eradicated very easily. And what troubles me more, or the most, is the emergence then, out of postmodernism and its crisis, of actual posthumanism. You'll meet lots of transhumanists here. I only have a tactical different. Well, there's plenty of transhumanists in the AI industry and in the kind of accelerationist world. My tactical disagreement with them is I want the transformations to be society-wide and accessible, not the individual on the kind of on the kind of seafront at Cannes who's got their robotic arm and many other appendages. That we all need to do it together. The post-humanists believe we are already not human due to our interaction with technology. Now, to me, that's the big debate of the future. It's so attractive for corporations to say, since we are already either not human or half human, as Luciano Floridi effectively argues, we are information organisms already playing away on the away team's ground of technology, then we have lost our ability to possess agency. And so I want to push these debates into the boardrooms, and indeed, even not just the boardrooms, into the engineering faculties and the NLP faculties, where my travels in them have revealed to me a very interesting thing. They don't exist. Nobody knows about them. Nobody's even interested in them. And that is the surprising thing. Metaphorically, this hasn't happened, but you can imagine it. The engineer is saying, look at my killer robot. And then you say, what about the ethics? They go, well, yeah, at the end of the year, there's an ethics conference about killer robots. But by the way, look at my one that I built here. Should I take it to the conference? We're not even, you laugh, but we're actually at that situation.
So out of this redescription of the human and society as part of a process, you talk about the diminishment of our ability to change and our diminishment of our freedom. You get quite fatalistic. This is where I want to draw in my favorite pop culture reference from your book. You talk about Game of Thrones.
Yep.
Having finished watching Game of Thrones, are you still of the opinion that our narratives are fatalistic?
Well, yeah, in the book, what I argue is that I want us to reintroduce teleological narratives where human beings go through a process of beginning, middle, end, confronting a problem and overcoming it through human greatness. Casablanca. That's all movie writers. We have to study Casablanca for that reason. Now, what's interesting about the world around you is that many stories have become endless stories. Unchained Melody. It goes on forever. Homeland. Whatever they do, the black population of Baltimore cannot escape the fate of being drug dealers. In The Wire. In Homeland, Carrie Matheson, whatever she does, however much she saves the world, she destroys Carrie Matheson because she's got the bipolar disorder. And in fact, what these stories on HBO and Netflix are brilliant at is placing a character on a 360 revolving dial and just studying the character. That's why it's so rewarding to be the actor. In Game of Thrones, of course, the premise is there are gods playing a game with us, and whatever happens is our fate is determined by us. And you may know there's a huge debate going on among Game of Thrones fans about why it went wrong in the last three series.
Yeah, I've actually seen some of that.
And the reason is because they stopped writing it as an epic where literally the gods are playing with people, and reverted to the Hollywood movie stereotype of it being characters who determine their own fate. And so what we need from then are psychological reasons. We didn't care about the psychology of Cersei Lannister. She's just awful, but people identify her because she has fun. But yeah, I think we're surrounded by a mass religion of folk religion, of fatalism, that I think the market era has really inculcated into us. And you'll find people say, as Yuval Noah Harari says in his book, between determinism and randomness, between everything that happened to us, that created us, and the random events that go on in our brain and around us, there is no room for free will. Now, that's quite interesting, especially if you're religious, because I'm not religious, but religious people, all religions are focused around choice, good versus bad. And the secular religion of humanism, of radical humanism, which I want to bring to the AI debate, is one that would say, no, we need to, the stories that we need to tell are the ones about where human beings liberate themselves through defying both fate and randomness and DNA. And in fact, that's what technological progress has been for 200,000 years.
So in some parts of the book, you're actually quite pro-automation for liberating us.
I'm very pro-automation.
And in some parts, you seem more concerned about digital feudalism. How do we get to an automation for the people but avoid control by the few?
Okay, so I'm not only a tech optimist, I'm a tech utopian. I believe that very, very, in the middle of this century, within most of our lifetimes, we could achieve a very low work, high abundance society on the basis of what we have now. You wouldn't need AGI to achieve it. You just need a fairly decisive automation of what we've already got. So process automation on steroids could get us quite a long way towards a situation where most things, most food, most energy, energy is zero carbon, food, shelter, transport, can be substantially, the zero marginal cost effect just collapses the price of everything. Of course, what you need to do to do this is unleash the technology from out of the social relations of production of the market. That's in my previous book, Post-Capitalism. I argued that information technology is so different from all previous machine technologies that it is likely to just blow apart capitalism. And you, the business leaders, decision makers, NGO people, are going to have to live in a world where the social relations of a primarily market economy based on scarcity aren't going to work with the tech. So now, in the practical work I've done, I don't do any practical work in tech, but in advisory and discussion work that I've done, for example, with Barcelona, the city of Barcelona, under the mayorship of Ada Colau, who's this left-wing radical, and she had this project of digital democracy, obviously for the people, digitizing democracy, but also of open technology in the city, so mandatory open source, mandatory non-profit, the mandating that the data of the smart city, and this is a big thing to do for a city that hosts the biennial expo for the cell phone industry, the data of the smart city is the cities and the publics, not Cisco, Accenture and the rest. So I think we're at the foothills. It's just that people don't want to call it post-capitalism. We're at the foothills of a very positive automation story where we can de-link work from wages and rapidly automate the world. And that's good because work less and save the planet is a great slogan, because you don't need it. Working less and automating stuff is ultimately going to save the world. But to do it, what we need is to introduce the dimension of who is technology for. And the previous speaker, and I gave some great examples of the way I think the structure of the CEO world never allows them to answer that. But I think that the people who are going to answer this are politicians. They're starting to answer, who is energy for? Why do we burn so much shitty carbon? Why, and therefore, for whom do we want to digitize the city? For whom do we want to digitize the entire healthcare system? Is the ultimate question. And of course, my argument is it's for us. But you can only logically get to that argument if you leave aside anti-humanism. Because anti-humanism, ultimately, why there's so many anti-post and transhumanist philosophers on ethics boards of big companies, because ultimately they will tell those big companies it's for you.
I think that's a wonderful place to stop with the message of work less, save the planet.
Yeah.
I can go with that. That's fine. So if you'd like to join me in thanking Paul Mason.
A pleasure.
Thank you.
It's bloody